subject of today's webinar is DAC6 reporting in Cyprus. And it's all about practical experience that we made from reporting in Cyprus. So I'm Anna Skudlarek, and I'm together today with Paul Millen. We founded Bluebridge together and combine our technical and operational expertise so that we can provide DAC6 services to our clients. So we both have extensive knowledge and experience in advising clients in regulatory matters and successfully producing regulatory reports. At Bluebridge, our goal is to provide our clients with peace of mind and freedom from DAC6 obligations. So before we launch to our agenda, there was one question, where can we find the slides? So these slides are not yet made available. After the webinar, we will upload the slides together with the recording on our blog, and as a participant, you will receive an email notification from us. That's the slides and recording have been uploaded on our website. Hope this answers your question. So what are we going to talk about today? So today's focus is to give you a recipe for a successful reporting experience, but at the same time to stay realistic, because there can be some obstacles on the way to success. And our aim is to show you how to mitigate those. We will start with a refresher on general reporting requirements, and those reporting requirements specific to Cyprus, including penalties and reporting deadlines and any updates that have been in circulation since. This part will be delivered to you by Paul. The second half of the webinar will be all about practical experience on how to get the report out, which I happily will break down the whole process into small pieces for you. Finally, we will close with key takeaways and ways in which we can support you in your DAC6 obligations. With that, I hope I can hand over to Paul for the general reporting, to take you through the general reporting requirements. I think we have a little bit of a technical problem. 1 second. Before Paul is set up, maybe I can ask a question around, has any one of you filed the DAC6 report already this year? I know that the deadline in Cyprus have been postponed several times. Not yet. Yeah, I know that the new deadline is coming up soon. Anyone else? We have filed at Bluebridge, we have filed a number of reports, and really looking forward to sharing this experience with you. Oh yes, Vasilis has filed a report. Congratulations. Were you successful first time? Or feel free to unmute yourself and this time while we're waiting for Paul. Were you successful first time, Vasilis, or did you get a rejection?
Yes, hello, yes.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, it was accepted. I don't know from then on.
Great, congratulations. Yeah.
It was accepted, the XML file, but I don't know. They didn't came back with any issues or something yet. I don't know if they will come.
I think it's when you get a message that the XML was accepted, that means the
Okay.
format was correct and that you submitted all the required information by the authorities.
Yes,
yeah.
because we have a tool that we use, and
yeah.
Okay, and we submitted the XML file.
Excellent. That's cool.
But of course, we have a lot of questions about many other, if we are going to report or not, because we are not having any guidelines yet.
Yeah. That's the major challenge. I know. I've been speaking to a few consultants, and many are actually advising for filing of the reports, despite the guidelines are not there, based on the guidelines provided by other European jurisdictions. So that's interesting, right?
But that's correct. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Yeah, but
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. And I suppose any questions we can ask later. Yes, if we have.
Absolutely. You
Yes,
can, you can also interrupt us at any time, and by asking a question in the chat, and we can then answer those questions in the meantime. So
thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you for sharing your experience. Really appreciate
nothing.
it.
Okay, nothing. It's okay. Bye.
Excellent. Bye. Okay, so let me go through the DAC6 general reporting requirements, just as a refresher and reminder before we move on to the practical part. Yep. So so a recap. From the 1st of January 2021, any cross-border arrangement that involves at least one member state and is subject to one of the DAC6 hallmarks qualifies as a reportable cross-border arrangement. That means it is reportable under DAC6 by one of the persons or parties to the arrangement that has a reporting duty, and that would be intermediary or taxpayer. So of course, there will be a reportable cross-border arrangement where one of the intermediaries will not be an EU member state, or a taxpayer will not be an EU member state, or and in that case, only the person that is actually an EU member will have the reporting duty to report on the arrangement by the due date. What's mandatory in many jurisdictions, and certainly in Cyprus, is that all those reports have to be submitted in XML format to the local tax authorities, and there is this rolling deadline of 30 days. So maybe this is not yet the case in Cyprus because the deadline has been postponed several times, but in other jurisdictions, the intermediaries are working already around the clock to file these reports within 30 days deadline. I think Paul is on, and he should now be able to carry on. Thank you
for taking over, for subbing in at the last moment. Appreciate that. And sorry, everyone, for the technical delay. I'm sure Anna handled it very ably and there was no loss in quality. But as Anna mentioned, the reports are due 30 days mandatorily, and the XML formats will vary in the jurisdictions. There is a standardized XML format, but different jurisdictions have applied different tweaks to them. And we'll go into the ones that Cyprus has elected to include. And of course, the specific reporting portals on which all the DAC6 disclosures need to be submitted will vary per jurisdiction as well. Typically, these portals will be the actual standard general tax reporting portal where you put in your VAT returns and maybe even your corporate income tax returns. But there's no reason why they couldn't also be dedicated portals designed simply for DAC6 reporting. Anna's gone over the deadlines a little bit, and I'll go a little bit deeper into some of the delays that we've seen in Cyprus when we get into the Cyprus specific portion of the technical side, which is my portion of today's webinar. But now I'm going to bring you into a more general overview of what DAC6 reporting looks like. So Anna, if you can push to the next slide. So once you've decided that once you've realized that your cross-border arrangement meets one of the hallmarks that according to the EU is indicative of aggressive tax practices, then your cross-border arrangement, your transaction, becomes a reportable cross-border arrangement. And once an arrangement becomes reportable, someone needs to report it. There's a hierarchy of who needs to do reporting under DAC6. And the first line of reporting are the intermediaries, which is why it's often referred to as an intermediary disclosure regime. And intermediaries for purposes of DAC6 are basically going to be the people on this call and presenting on this webinar. Lawyers, fiduciaries, accountants, private bankers, anyone who's providing advice and support with respect to tax activities for EU persons. Where, however, there is no intermediary who is able to report, either because all the intermediaries are outside of the European Union, Switzerland, America, Japan, where have you, or because they're subject to an exception to reporting because perhaps the information would violate attorney-client legal professional privilege if it were disclosed, then the so-called relevant taxpayer needs to do the reporting. And the relevant taxpayer means basically the people in the EU who benefit from the particular arrangement, so the clients, if you will. Now, once you do have a report, of course, it needs to be submitted by one of these two parties. And the information that needs to be submitted is set forth in the DAC6 protocol and is standardized across the EU. Now, again, standardized, as we'll see, is a loose term for DAC6 purposes. And other jurisdictions require different definitions of what's mandatory and what's merely advisable to be included in your DAC6 report. But we'll take you through the statutory guidance now of what information is mandatory under the DAC6 protocol. So what they're really looking for is the names of the other parties who are connected to this particular reportable cross-border arrangement. So your role as the reporting party is to basically disclose information on every other party to that arrangement, including their name, their date and place of birth in case of an individual, their residence for tax purposes, their taxpayer identification number, and any associated enterprises of these parties. An associated enterprise is basically a related person, where it's an organization that is owned by one of the parties or has the same umbrella ownership as one of the parties. So that's the information you need to provide in your DAC6 report for the other parties to this particular reportable cross-border arrangement. And in addition, of course, you need to provide information on the cross-border arrangement itself. And the first issue that you need to include are which of the hallmarks were satisfied that turned this particular arrangement into a reportable arrangement under DAC6. Critical here is to understand that you don't just list one hallmark, the first one that you meet, and then you stop doing the analysis. DAC6 is very clear on this point. They want you to name and include every single hallmark that particular arrangement meets. So you need to go through very carefully and ensure that you've identified all of the relevant hallmarks for that particular cross-border arrangement. Now, the next one is a summary of the content of the reportable cross-border arrangement. Now, if it has a commonly known name like the Irish-Dutch sandwich, you can certainly include that, but most of these transactions don't have a trade name, in which case, in a free text field, you will need to write a few sentences that will allow the tax authorities to understand exactly what's going on with this arrangement why it's cross-border, and why it's reportable under DAC6. Next slide, please. The next piece of information you need to include is the date, the so-called trigger date on which the first step for the reportable cross-border arrangement has or will be made. And the exact, what constitutes a trigger date, whether it's the first step in the execution of the transaction or a specific date on which advisory services were provided, it depends on the precise type of intermediary or whether it's a relevant taxpayer doing the reporting. And Cyprus has some very helpful guidance in its, or helpful instructions in its guidance notes, which I'll address in a moment, which will help clarify this topic and how to deal with situations where you have different trigger dates for the same reportable arrangement. The next topic that needs to be included are the national provisions of the tax code that form the basis of the arrangement. This obviously can be quite difficult, and numerous jurisdictions have stepped back a little bit from this requirement and said, if you don't know, you don't necessarily have to include this, but if it is obvious that you're taking advantage of a certain provision of a tax code, then that should be included in your DAC6 disclosure. The next item of information is the value of the reportable cross-border arrangement. And in our experience, this is one of the areas that people have the most difficulty in getting right, mainly because people assume that because this is a tax disclosure regime, that when the authorities say value, they mean the tax value of the arrangement, but they don't. It's the actual market value, the commercial value of the arrangement, rather than the tax gain from whichever aggressive tax practices was adopted in order to make this into a reportable cross-border arrangement. And then the other two items are sort of cleanup items. They're broadening the net a bit, so to make sure that any other EU persons who were involved in any way, even if they don't qualify as an intermediary, but if they were affected by it, or if any other EU jurisdiction played a role in this reportable cross-border arrangement, that you name them here so that the information can be shared with those jurisdictions. So that is in sum what the content of a DAC6 disclosure report must include. Now, as one final point, some people here may have heard about marketable arrangements and how a DAC6 disclosure needs to be done one time, but if it's a marketable arrangement, there is an ongoing reporting duty. So that is the case. You need to do quarterly updates for any reportable cross-border arrangement that qualifies as a marketable arrangement. And a marketable arrangement is defined as one that does not need much, that is heavily standardized, that does not require substantial customization to be sold to multiple different parties. And what they're really aiming for here are basically tax products that people can develop, and then they can sell to all comers who are interested or similarly situated and can take advantage of this particular tax product. So if you have a marketable arrangement, then you need to do potentially multiple reporting on that particular reportable cross-border arrangement. Next slide, thanks. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the idiosyncrasies that we see in Cyprus with the reporting. And moving forward, let's talk about the reporting dates, because this is maybe the biggest outlier for Cyprus so far. If we go down, if we start at the left, we see 25th of June 2018 is when the EU published the DAC6 protocol. And it was initially supposed to come into force on the 1st of July 2020. But due to COVID, there was a general 6-month delay throughout the EU that all but a few EU member states adopted, and Cyprus adopted. So that was an official delay. And at that point, the regime was supposed to come into force on the 1st of January of this year, with the first reporting deadline going to be the 31st of January of this year. Many EU member states, including Cyprus, were not able to meet this deadline and started providing administrative release notices that basically said, yes, the deadline remains on this date, but if you don't get it in on this date, but you get it in by a later date, 30th of June, 30th of September, 30th of November, there will not be any penalties assessed for late filings. And Cyprus is, to my knowledge, the only jurisdiction that still has not had its first reporting date. I think all of them basically landed on the 30th of June as the latest possible date, but Cyprus seems to be struggling to meet those deadlines. And up until yesterday, we thought we'd be saying that the new deadline is the 30th of September, and everyone needs to make sure they get everything in by that date, so a week from today. But then yesterday, the Cyprus authorities released another administrative relief the document. I have it right here. Let me see what it's called. It's called the Extension to the Imposition of Administrative Fines for Overdue Submissions of Information. And that is a short way of saying, a long way of saying that the new deadline for the first set of reports in Cyprus under DAC6 is the 30th of November of this year. That was released just yesterday afternoon. And that means, in short, that the following reports will be due on the 30th of November. So all of the so-called retrospective reporting reports, so the ones you see on the left on this slide in the first blue box, so any activities up until the 30th of June of 2020, which were initially going to be due on the 28th of February that should be 2021 of this year, those are going to be due on the 30th of November. All of the reportable cross-border arrangements that were initiated subsequent to the 1st of July and all the way through the 31st of December. So that was the actual delay, the technical delay, the legal delay. Those are going to be due on the 30th of November. And then all of the reports initiated since the 1st of January up until the 31st of October of this year that are subject to this administrative relief mechanism, those are going to be due on the 30th of November as well. So basically anything that you have that's reportable under DAC6 dating all the way back to June 25th, 2018, all the way forward to the 31st of October, Halloween of this year of 2021, those reports will all be due on or before the 30th of November of this year, pending another delay. Next slide, please. Now, what have we seen from Cyprus so far that implicates the reporting under DAC6? Well, they've done some good advisory work in letting us know how to apply these trigger dates. So the trigger dates, as I mentioned earlier, vary depending upon which precise type of intermediary you are, whether you are a service provider or a promoter, or whether you are reporting as a relevant taxpayer. And this is useful for understanding situations where a single reportable cross-border arrangement has multiple trigger dates for different parties, which may require you to assign the reporting to the party with the earliest trigger date rather than risk non-compliance when a party with a later trigger date reports after the initial deadline is passed for the first reporting party. These are things you need to be careful of because of the variety in the reporting deadlines for the same transaction. You don't want to be doing the reporting and then find out that one of the parties that you named in the report who's relying on you to do the report is non-compliant because of the deadline on which or the date on which you submitted the report. It also provides, on bullet point 2, scenarios in which a relevant taxpayer, so the secondary reporting party, actually incurs the reporting duty. So it provides some examples of what it means where no EU intermediary is available or is able to submit the report due to legal professional privilege, and what then will fall to the relevant taxpayer to do the report. So there's some good concrete examples in there. The next useful element is a hierarchy of jurisdictions. So it may very well be that a single entity incurs a DAC6 reporting duty on a single reportable cross-border arrangement in more than one jurisdiction. So let's say that you are a Cyprus bank and you have a branch in France, and you provide services out of both of those locations for the same reportable cross-border arrangement. You may not know whether you should submit the report in Cyprus or you should submit it in France, or you can submit it in either case, in either place. And so Cyprus explains to you how you should handle that hierarchy, and which of those parties then should do the reporting for with respect to that particular arrangement. So this would be where you have one entity with operations, but not subsidiaries, but operations in different jurisdictions. And the final piece of good news on the reporting side from the Cyprus authorities is a good faith defense. So you are obligated to include all the information relevant to a reportable cross-border arrangement. But the Cyprus authorities made it clear that there's a reasonable good faith defense that you, of course, can only provide the information that you're in control of, that you're aware of. And so they do not punish you for non-compliance if you submit an incomplete report, but you had a valid basis for not including that information, namely you didn't know it. So that's the good side and the helpful reporting guidance that's contained. We just got a question about guidance. There is draft guidance issued. I still have not seen the final guidance, but as far as I know, the draft guidance is widely circulated. Someone asked the question, that's why I'm addressing that, if the guidance was available yet. I've seen it, it's been out since about over a year now, and it's popped up in a lot of places, and it's regularly referenced as far as I can see. So let's go to the other side of the ledger, the not so nice side of the guidance for DAC6 reporting, which are the penalties. And the guidance sets forth a variety of penalties associated with DAC6 reporting. And these can be obviously not filing a report that is due, whether intentionally or out of neglect, filing an incomplete or misleading report that is not validated by the good faith defense. If it's incomplete, but you did have control over the information, then that is a violation, a breach of your responsibilities. Or of course, delayed reports, missing a reporting deadline. And there's missing a reporting deadline by a little, less than 90 days, or missing it by a lot, more than 90 days. And there's different levels of fines depending upon which particular, by how many days you miss the deadline. The good news, the additional good news is the actual penalties may be reduced if you yourself recognize the fault in advance of any audit or reviews performed by auditors or the authorities, and you amend or remedy the mistake that you made in the report. If you do that, you will still be non-compliant and you will still be subject to penalties, but those penalties will be reduced. And the final very nice attribute of the DAC6 reporting guidance is it provides relief from duplicate reporting in the case of multiple intermediaries or relevant taxpayers, so long as one party is submitting the report and that report is, to the best of your knowledge, accurate, and you receive the unique reporting ID that the reporting party received from their local authorities, Cypriot or other EU member state. You put that in your files, and you do not need to submit a DAC6 report yourself. And if you look at the Bluebridge website, one of the services we offer is to undertake the reporting on your behalf. There's certain conditions that must be met for that service to be available to you. But if you meet those conditions, namely engaging us prior to the initiation of the arrangement itself, then we can handle the reporting on your behalf, and we will do it correct, and we will provide you the unique ID number for your files, and you have no other duties with respect to that particular DAC6 report. Okay, so that takes us through the general DAC6 technical reporting guidance, and I'm going to hand it back to Anna now, who's going to take you through some of the operational experiences we've had with DAC6 in Cyprus. Anna?
Thank you very much, Paul. We do have two questions, though. Maybe we can stop here and answer them. Paul, maybe you can take the last one. Can you provide a couple of real life examples of marketable arrangements?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the most common one, and this would be relevant for the fiduciary industry, is basically setting up an entity using a template document. We've talked about this on other podcasts, other webinars, where in many cases, if you're setting up a traditional private wealth management structure with a trust as the apex entity and then underlying company or multiple underlying entities beneath, often the trust itself will be customized for the particular needs and desires of the settlor and the beneficiaries. But more often than not, the underlying company is just based on a standardized template, not customized and used again and again, almost irrespective of the need of the condition of the trust or the parties to the arrangement. Something like that to me would qualify or could qualify as a marketable arrangement.
Thank you. Hope this answered your question. There's a second question on the draft guidance notes, whether we're referring to the DAC6 user guide. I think the DAC6 user guide is the pure technical guide for preparation of the XML and the information that you need to submit. And the guidance notes are called something else. But if you allow us, Harry, I will double check that information and contact you after the webinar, what the document is called that we are referring to exactly. Unless, Paul, you know the answer. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Kari. Okay, so let's get to the practical part. And yeah, I believe you here because you either know that you have the reporting obligation under DAC6, or you think you might have this reporting obligation because you're an intermediary or a relevant taxpayer, or because there is no other EU intermediary in the arrangement that you are participant at. We're here to show you how to do it based on our own experience filing for our clients in Cyprus. Let me start with the key steps in the DAC6 reporting journey in Cyprus. So before I go through all the steps, I can tell you that the best case scenario for reporting, for filing a DAC6 report in Cyprus is 2 days. So it might take you minimum of 2 days from the time you register until you get a confirmation of a successful submission. Or it could actually take you up to 2 weeks to finalize one single DAC6 report. We're here to deliver you a couple of hints tips how to shorten this time frame and file successfully in Cyprus. So the first step, which is very, very quick and is done online, is the registration on the Ariadne portal. That's the initiation of the registration, where you say, I as the intermediary or I as a taxpayer would like to file DAC6 returns. Then you need to wait a little bit for the portal administration to accept you and activate your account. This can take up to 5 days, depending on whether they have any additional questions or whether you have already previously used Ariadne for filing of other reports or making other submissions, or whether you are completely new to that portal. The next step is a big one and actually can be started after you've initiated the registration. And whilst you're waiting for the approval from the administrator, is the preparation of the reportable information that needs to be submitted. And that needs to be done in accordance with the Cyprus XML schema. And depending on your experience, your expertise, and technical abilities, it might take you up to 5 days to prepare it, provided you have all the information that you need for the reporting. So once you've got the XML file, The next step, and a very quick one, it takes you no more than 5 minutes, including the login to the Ariadne portal, is the upload of that XML file. There is a question, if I may interrupt that flow. Is the Ariadne registration for the target company itself? Yes, so the party that's filing the return, so you as the intermediary, you would register in your own name, or you as a taxpayer, you will register in your own name to file the return. So then once you've submitted the report, you wait for an email from Ariadne. It's very quick. It doesn't take more than 5 minutes, and you will know straight away whether your report has been accepted or whether there are any submission errors. So when you do receive an email that the submission has been rejected because there are some errors, you basically read that email and try to fix your XML and resubmit it again until you have been accepted by the portal. So in the next 15-20 minutes, I will walk you through every single step of that reporting journey. So let's start with the registration for DAC6 services. So I will just send you in the chat, maybe or maybe not. I wanted to send you the link to the Ariadne portal, but I don't seem to be able to do that. But we can also include in our blog post. However, if you Google Ariadne DAC6 reporting Cyprus, you will be directed in Google searches to the website without problems. Generally, you need to think of a username and the password for your registration. I would advise to think through what the username, which is the email address, will be. And my recommendation is to use the company's group email address, which is Ludmila. I think you're not muted. I'm sorry. And could you mute yourself? I don't seem to be able to mute you. Thank you. Sorry for this interruption. So yes, use a company's group email address if you have an email like that, yeah, rather than an email address of an individual. Because if you do that, then a number of people in your organization will have access to this Ariadne account and not just one person, so you can reduce a risk in that way. So many of our clients, and that also is Bluebridge, use an email address such as info or hello@companyname.com, or DAC6 if you're a bigger organization, DAC6@companyname.com, or reporting@companyname.com. It's easily done, very quick to configure, and then you can share a password between a couple of users that will file DAC6 reports on behalf of your organization. This is important because you will receive all portal notifications to this email address, and that's about report submissions, any errors, queries, or clarifications, and therefore you want this inbox to be monitored by at least 2 people. It's easy. You come up with the email, then you come up with a password, and fill out the company or individual's data, and submit it. If you already have an account with Ariadne, then all you need to do is to, which is on the second screenshot on the right-hand side, to sign up for the DAC6 services in the e-service catalog. It's as simple as that. It's very straightforward. So once you've initiated the registration, you wait to be accepted as an organization to file DAC6 reports. There are 2 ways to achieve that. So a quick way, which is on the right-hand side, it's where you already have an Ariadne account and you're just signing up to another e-service, which would be, in this case, DAC6. So you basically click, I want to add DAC6 to my e-services catalog, and then usually it takes 1 day for the portal administrator to approve you. One piece of advice, if by any means you recorded your name, which is not aligned with the name of the company that's included in the register of companies in Cyprus, then you will be asked to update it. And that may delay your registration process because someone will need to have a look at it, process it, send you an email and tell you, please update your name, because instead of limited, you put in LTD, or you had a typo or a misspelling. So that's easily done, but of course that adds a couple of days to your activation procedure. But generally very straightforward. If you're new to e-services, there is an extra step, because not only you need to create an Ariadne profile on Ariadne portal, but also you need to have your profile need to be authenticated by a government authentication center. And that's very often done in person in Cyprus. So one of the employees, so one of your colleagues has to go to an authentication center, present the company's registration certificate, a document that's authorizing this employee to represent the company. So that could be a power of attorney if you don't want to send the director over, the ID of that person affecting the authentication, and the profile ID that you receive by email from Ariadne administration, which contains 16-digit number. So that will all be included in the email from Ariadne. If you create an Ariadne portal, automatically you will receive an email with the 16-digit number plus the instructions how to get your profile authenticated. After you've done that, then you will be able, and the government has approved your application, you will be able to log on as a normal Ariadne user and select, and only then select DAC6 from the e-services catalog. So there are a couple of questions at this stage. First one, can the directors of the company be considered as intermediary? And then in addition, as intermediary, we will submit the reports under our Ariadne account, or we have to create an account for each client. So to question number 2, no, you can act as agent on Ariadne and report on behalf of your clients. So basically you can say, I'm a submitter of the report and I'm submitting this on behalf of an intermediary. There is an option like that on the portal. However, I've never done it for DAC6. I've done it for the CRS, but I've never done it for DAC6. I'm not 100% sure whether it will go through. There is a possibility like that, but from my experience, one thing is the theory and the other thing, the practice, whether the portal will allow it. But perhaps there is somebody else here in the room who has done that and can confirm this is the case. Usually what I've seen is that one of the intermediaries in the arrangement says, okay, I will report for everybody, and shares the number. In terms of your first question, can the directors of the company be considered as intermediary? Usually I've seen the company itself to be the intermediary. Paul, do you have any extra insight on this maybe? Paul?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just trying to get the thing off. So could you point out the question to me? This was about the directors of the company?
Yeah, so that's in the chat. Second last question. Can the directors of the company be considered as intermediary?
if the company was the one providing the advice, then no, it would be the company who is is the intermediary, and the company needs to be the one to file the DAC6 disclosure report under its own name. It can't be an agent or a director of the company unless it's delegated by the company to them.
Thank you. That's also my understanding. After your profile has been authenticated and reviewed by the administrator, you will be able to see the status of your registration. So let me just go back quickly. On the screen here on the right, when you click on DAC6 in the red box, registration, then immediately you will be taken to that screen over here. So here you see for Bluebridge, our status is that the registration has been approved. When we were in the middle of the registration, it said pending. So here you always be able to see the current status. So only in the event when your registration is approved, you will be able to submit DAC6 return. So you have to wait for this status to be updated. Okay, once you've registered, the next step is to prepare the data for the report. So in that, you're not only required to know the DAC6 vocabulary and what it all means to you, and especially to the reportable cross-border arrangement that you're considering, but also apply the terminology to the transaction and be able to generate an XML out of the data you prepared. So that's not only DAC6 expertise that's required from you as the submitter, but also some IT expertise as well. What do you need to ask yourself before you start preparing the data set? Well, is the transaction or an arrangement really a reportable cross-border arrangement, and what does this mean? What hallmarks are applicable to that arrangement? Maybe there's more than one hallmark that's applicable. Are you a reporting intermediary or a relevant taxpayer? And who is really the reporting party in this arrangement? Meaning, do you personally have the obligation to report? You also need to find out and establish the valuation of the arrangement. Yeah, and the tax benefit. Is there a tax benefit to it? Think also about the use of any exemptions that apply in Cyprus or any other jurisdiction that you are subject to DAC6 reporting. And also the national provisions, which Paul mentioned earlier. Finally, what really has impact on when you need to file and the due date for your filing is the date of the implementation of the arrangement or a first step. And you need to take the earliest one. Thereafter, it all needs to be converted into an XML, because XML format is the only format accepted in Cyprus for filing DAC6 reports. So make sure you have this expertise in-house or work with an advisor, and that could help you with the data conversion. So at Bluebridge, we consolidate those two types of expertise. We do have DAC6 experts in our team and IT expertise that will ensure your report is in the right format and successfully submitted on the Ariadne portal. In particular, that's our service number 3 that Paul mentioned earlier, where if you engage us early in the process, in the reporting process, we can not only give you an advice, but also file the report on your behalf as an intermediary, and therefore relieve you from any liability. Okay, so to sum up, what is your reporting checklist? What are the things that you need to have? Once you've established that you do have a reporting cross-border arrangement, So we grouped them into two key parts. So there is identification information that you need to collect for all parties that are relevant for the arrangement, and information in relation to the arrangement itself. So who are the involved parties in the arrangement? That's the taxpayer, relevant taxpayer. Other intermediaries that were the advisors to the arrangement. Any associated enterprise or enterprises, and any other affected persons. You need a name, registered residential address for all of them, and to know what their role is. Are they associated enterprise or other taxpayer? Furthermore, you need a TIN number for each of those parties. So if you're including those parties in your report, the report might be rejected if you do not include those TIN numbers. The TIN numbers are mandatory. In terms of the information for the arrangement itself, here you need to provide the name of the arrangement, the evaluation and tax benefits, all applicable hallmarks, the description of the arrangement, and here piece of advice: think through how you will describe this arrangement, because this information will be exchanged with all other member states, so another 24 member states. So it's good to be concise and careful how you choose the words. And of course, the date this arrangement became effective, because this determines the submission deadline. Finally, any relevant national provisions. On the relevant national provisions, my experience is that you don't actually need to include them if you don't know them. So the report goes through even if you don't include any relevant national provisions. So that means if you know them, it's a nice to have to include them, because then it completes the information on the arrangement. If you don't spend too much time searching for that, because the report will be accepted. Yeah. So after you've collected all the data and put it, I don't know, in a Word format, in the Excel, it's time to convert it into the XML. So if you've never filed any reports before in the XML format, this is how the XML format looks like. It's not very readable and user-friendly. There are a couple of applications that will allow you to convert it into a more readable format. Still, it's quite difficult to read it if you're not familiar with it. The alternative is to work with Bluebridge. We developed a form that is very user-friendly, quick to fill out, contains all the information or mandatory fields that have to go into the XML report, and will ensure success for your filing. So once you've got the data, it's time to upload it. You've got the data, you have the XML file, you store it on your computer. Next step is to log on to your Ariadne account. Choose DAC6 from the e-services menu, and then you will be directed to this screen over here. Please check your company name, especially if you registered a number of company names, that you're filing under the correct company name, because if you don't do that, for sure you will get a rejection. And it's as simple as that you need to just pick up your file from your desktop or any other filing place and upload it here and submit it. If you don't know how to submit it, or if you need any extra guidance, or if you need any instructions on the XML, look at the validation rules and any other user guides. These are all uploaded to this website, the tax department website, and you're able to download it. So any XML schema that has been updated for DAC6 purposes in Cyprus will be uploaded here. So you can always compare it with the previous one and see what changes need to be made. Also, there are some instructions on how to edit the files, your XML files, to change something in your XML, and how actually the XML schema works in practice. So once you have submitted the report, two things can happen. In both cases, you will receive an email from Ariadne. Yeah. So you might receive good news or bad news. The good news is that your report has been accepted, but the bad news is that it could be that your submission has been rejected for a number of reasons. It is not uncommon that the report is rejected, and there are various reasons behind it. And not all of them mean that it is your fault. So let me walk you through a couple of examples. So we have, so the government recognized 24 possible business rule validation errors that may occur. And these are documented on the governmental website. However, my experience is that you do receive other errors as well, not only those ones that are included on the website. So I've included here a couple of examples from our experience. And for instance, once we filed a report for an intermediary, and then we got the message, you know, the report has not been accepted and requires a resubmission. And you don't actually understand what it means. Yeah? So in this case, you know, you had to go to the IT department and find out what is actually meant by this message. And you can also contact Ariadne and follow up with them. Another time, we've heard that you know, when someone filed a return as a taxpayer, there was an error message that that the taxpayer was not included, but the taxpayer filed a return. So it meant that you not only have to file as a taxpayer in the role of a submitter, but also you need to include yourself again as a taxpayer in the body of the XML. The other examples that we've seen are that, you know, when you did the description of the arrangement or put any text in a free text box, then, you know, there might have been some special characters not accepted by the portal administration. And so the rejection happened, or you simply just missed some mandatory data that you weren't aware were mandatory, or there was an update to an XML schema that you weren't aware of. And you need to basically use a different template and resubmit it again. I've seen another error which just says invalid XML content, and then you don't really know, you know, where you're supposed to start, and you start from the top and compare it with the template XML to see whether you've used, whether maybe a character is missing. That throws the whole XML upside down. So although there is a guide issued by the government, like I mentioned on the XML errors, often it is not very clear what needs to be done. And IT expertise comes in very valuable. It is important that you have a plan B when you file DAC6 reports, and there is someone that you can turn to for help who has experience filing XMLs returns. So let me sum up. What happens when the file was rejected? Well, first of all, do not panic. This happens very often, especially when the regime is a new regime. Very important to go and speak to your IT department. Yeah, to check with them, show them the XML, show them the error message, forward the error message from the portal, and I tell you, like 70% of the cases, the IT people will be able to work it out. So the next step, once you've identified the problem, correct the XML or issue a new one, generate a new XML which contains all the corrections, and then resubmit it on the portal. Sometimes you need to go through a couple of cycles to get it right, but very often on the second try you get accepted by the portal. And then you can move on to a next report to move on to the next report. So there is one question I saw. If we do not know something, shall we leave it blank or delete the whole paragraph in the XML? That depends on whether this field is mandatory or not. So like national provisions, this is optional. So you can leave it blank, or you can put not applicable or not known. But there are fields where you really need to write something or add a record, especially when these are the fields like a city. There will be a validation check that it is a city and not some random string of characters. So first question to ask yourself, is this field mandatory or not? Yeah, and hopefully many of us will have the report accepted first time. But if not, it's not the end of the world. You can always resubmit it. Yes, it may be accepted. Sorry, just going back to the question. Yes, it may be accepted blank if the field is not mandatory, because then it will not show. It will not show in the XML at all. This part will be will not show in the conversion, basically. Pleasure. Okay, so we're running late. I only have 2 more slides left, so let me sum up quite quickly where we are. So just on the DAC6 reporting pitfalls, top 3 things to look out for and take notice of right now is that, first of all, the manual preparation of the XML is not a recipe for success. Yeah, so it really increases the chances for the submission rejection. It's better to do it automatically using a tool or using professional help. Then the next thing is really to do with the DAC6 expertise. Yeah? Make sure you interpret the DAC6 regulation correctly. That you pick the right hallmarks that are really applicable to the arrangement. And all the reportable parties that you know of, and you know all about the due dates. These are the common mistakes that people make, and it's very valuable to get advice. Then the third one we have here on the list is when you don't look at your home jurisdiction. So in Cyprus, know the exemptions that are applicable to you and any advantages in the local rules that you could really utilize and maybe not be obliged to file a DAC6 return. Yeah? So it's only when you cannot take the advantage of the exemptions, you should file the DAC6 return. And of course, if you meet all the requirements for the reportable cross-border arrangements. Other things that we have seen where people had difficulties, of course, are when you start preparing your report too late, yeah, and you're missing information, and you have to ask for this information. You're not sure, okay, which hallmark is applicable, and you don't have a complete data set to file the report on time. So please make sure you start early collecting all the information, even before you start the registration process, because as you can see, the registration doesn't take too long. Then yeah, that's what I said. If you don't have full information and you have to include information that's mandatory for the XML to be submitted and uploaded, then you know, you will get a rejection. Yeah. So it's important to have everything in place. Finally, we've seen a lot of valuation errors when it comes to the arrangement. So that means the questions that pop up very often, you know, are we talking about the tax savings amount or the actual economic value of the transaction? Yeah, so for the reportable cross-border arrangement, the value of that arrangement should reflect its market value, yeah, rather than amount paid or the tax advantage gained. So it's important to analyze this in advance. So I see there are some questions in the chat, and let me get through the key takeaway slide, and then we can go through the questions for those that have time and can stay online. So key takeaways for DAC6 reporting in Cyprus. So timing, first of all, timing is of essence. Start real early. Yes, do the registration. If you think you have a reporting obligation, register early so that that's out of the way and done. Make sure you know the deadlines. Monitor the government website for any deadline extensions or any changes that they implement. And don't be late, start early, as I said, because, you know, maybe not today, but in a couple of months, the penalties will be triggered and you might receive a letter from the government that you now have to pay a penalty, which could have been easily avoided. Another key takeaway is that it really pays off to get professional help, especially when you don't have DAC6 expertise or IT expertise. Because someone very quickly, for instance, Bluebridge, can analyze your potentially reportable cross-border arrangement and give you an assessment of whether it's reportable and not reportable. Then, you know, that person can ensure that the reportable information is in the XML format as required. Finally, a professional advisor can help you to formulate the description or the name for the arrangement that it's meaningful to other member states and that disclose only the information that's absolutely necessary under the DAC6 regime. Finally, you know, have a checklist for in case your report gets rejected. Everything is possible in the technical world. So do not get discouraged if you get a submission error. Everything is fixable. It's an XML file. It has a beginning and end. There are only so many combinations that can go wrong. Okay, sometimes if you have zero expertise, it might take you a long time. But if you work with an advisor, they can fix those errors very quickly, and you can resubmit your report fast and before the deadline. Also, a rejection by the portal is not really a breach in compliance. It only means that there's something missing and you need to complete it and resubmit it. Finally, it's important, very, very important to check the tax government website regularly. They do change the schema, then they update the schema. They also, based on the submission error, recognize that some of the instructions are not clear and they fix those, or they realize some information in the XML is redundant, or there's you know, too little information and that a section needs to be added because the EU asked them to add something to the XML. So this is very important, and I know for a fact that in Cyprus this XML schema has been updated already a couple of times. So it's important to keep an eye on that. So that's a lot of work ahead of anyone that needs to file a DAC6 return. Bluebridge, we at Bluebridge can help you to do that. We have a lot of expertise. We work with a lot of clients that do file returns and have the responsibility and for DAC6. Some of them have some expertise, others have none, and we very comfortable at tailoring our services to various needs that you might have. Therefore, we came up with 3 types of services which are priced differently and also provide different scope of services to you. So the first one that we have is a simple report production. Let's say you do have the expertise to file, to prepare all the information for reporting, but you lack the IT expertise to convert it into an XML, like somebody asked in the chat. And we have a tool. We do it at Bluebridge. We can take the information and run it through our tool and then produce an XML for you so that you can file it on your under your account on Ariadne. Then we have a second service, which is reportability analysis service, and there here we provide you DAC6 advice on top of the XML conversion. So if you're not sure whether you do have a reportable cross-border arrangement and whether you do have an obligation to report, we can help you with that. And if we establish that, yes, you do have an obligation, we can help you to convert that into the XML format and submit it. Finally, the last service that we have, which is the most comprehensive one and really gives you a lot of freedom when it comes to DAC6, is when you engage us very early in the process and even before when you carry out the transaction, you say, okay, listen, Bluebridge, I do need to do this transaction, but I'm not sure whether it's in scope of DAC6. And then we can come in as an intermediary and provide you an advice on that. And if it turns out that this transaction is a reportable transaction and you decide to carry it out, nevertheless, we can file the return on your behalf, actually resume responsibility for the report as an intermediary, file it, relieve you from the liability and provide you with a confirmation number so that you can rest assured that you are compliant in respect to that reportable arrangements. Okay, so that would be anything from my side. Paul, is there anything you would like to add before we go through the questions?
No, thanks, Anna.
Okay, so there's a question. The date of the report will be the one when the report is accepted or just the first upload trial, when it's accepted. So the date of the report is when it has been accepted, because when the report is rejected, it basically disappears from the system. So it's important to do it early. Of course, you can get into a discussion with the portal administrator, because you will receive an email that says your report has been rejected. And then you can say, like, listen, I did try to file it on time. You know, can you accept this date as the reporting date? Because the deadline in Cyprus has been extended several times and we have not passed the deadline yet. It's difficult to say because we haven't made that experience yet, but I would advise you to start filing early. And does Bluebridge offer a system software to check transactions if they're reportable under DAC6? We do offer that service. So if you provide us with the information, we will be able to tell you whether the transaction is reportable or not reportable. Does anyone here actually know the XML? We do at Bluebridge. We work with XMLs. We've been working with XMLs for years. So I remember when I prepared my first XML for FATCA reporting in 2015. So that it was horrendous, but since then, you know, we have a working tool. It's excellent. We have lots of experience. We can read XMLs inside out, convert the information. Not much has changed since then in terms of the format of the XML. Yes, exactly. Now it's deadline for reporting is November. In the case of nil reporting, is filing still compulsory? I don't think there is a requirement to file nil returns. Paul, do you know an answer to that question? No.
I do. There are no nil returns under DAC6. DAC6 is case by case disclosure and reporting. It's not an annual requirement. So either you have it or you don't. And if you have it, you got to do this report. And if you don't, you are untouched by the regime.
Thank you. Thanks, Paul. I hope that answers all your questions in the chat. If you have any follow-up questions after this webinar, please, by all means, get in touch with Paul or myself. We will be more than happy to help you. And of course, if you're filing DAC6 reports, you know where to find us. You can either contact us or make an order directly via our bluebridgelimited.com website. It's very straightforward to do. With that, I wish you a lovely afternoon and hope to see you soon again. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Goodbye. Bye.